Yokoso owashitare. Welcome back. Today's story is actually one of my favorites. It's a classic tale about a bloodthirsty god, a sacrificial virgin, and a hero who comes in and rescues the day from it all. Apologies for the slight spoiler, but this is standard classical folktale myth and legend, so if you don't have a vague idea at least of how it ends, go watch some more Disney movies and then come back and listen to this story. But if you like Japanese history, classical Japanese, ancient Japanese literature, or just storytelling in general, please don't forget to like the video, please subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments how much of the story you guessed correctly. I don't know, it would be a little bit of fun. Anyway, with that all out of the way, let's get into the story. Once upon a time, ima wa mukashi. In the province of Mimasaka, there were two gods, Chu-san and Takano. At least I think you call the first god's name Chu-san. I'm not entirely sure how to say it. I'm pretty sure Takano is how you say the second god's name. Although the second god doesn't actually show up in the story, so I don't know why he's brought up here, but it's there. At any rate, Chu-san was in the form of a monkey, while Takano was in the form of a snake. So there is a monkey god and a snake god. The monkey god is the one with whom we are dealing with today. Now every year, the people of this province held a festival in honor of these two gods. And as part of the festival, a maiden who never knew the touch of a man was selected from among the people and offered up as a sacrifice to this monkey god. Now, despite this causing the denizens of the province mountains of distress, the people had kept this ritual and had kept this sacrificial tradition alive since ancient times without missing it once. Now, our story begins with a couple who lived in this province, a man and a woman who had between them a single daughter. A girl who's between 16 and 17 years old and was extremely beautiful. She was the pride and joy of these parents, and they loved her more than any earthly treasures, put her first in everything that they did. But, as cruel fate would have it, on the day of the festival, their daughter was selected to be the next sacrifice. Now, the way that the tradition worked was that on the day of the festival, after the sacrifice was offered up, the people would select the new sacrifice that very same day, thus giving those in charge of the girl an entire year to make sure that she was protected, taken care of, and fattened up in order to curry more favor with the monkey god. And so, when this girl was selected, her parents were absolutely devastated, and they wept and sobbed ceaselessly. But there was no way for them to escape their fate, and they simply spent as much of the little remaining time as possible with their daughter, and sadly counted the days in grief-stricken tears. Now, sometime before the actual day of the festival, there came into this province a man from the eastern provinces. Now, this man made his living through an activity called Inuyama, which involved him training a pack of dogs and taking them up into the mountains. He used them to hunt things like boar and deer, and that's how he made his living. And because he was a hunter, he was an extremely bold and daring man, and feared neither god nor man. And so, for whatever reason, this hunter ended up finding himself in this province. And he ended up spending a good amount of time there, and so naturally he heard about this whole sacrificial tradition, this monkey god business, and everything that it entailed. It also just so happened that he happened to have business with the father of the doomed girl, and so one day he went to their house to go discuss whatever it was that he had to discuss. The text doesn't mention exactly why. Now, upon his arrival, he was led to the veranda of the house and told to wait there as they went in and made preparations to receive him properly. But while he was waiting on the veranda, he suddenly grew curious, and creeping up to one of the lattice shutters, he stole a peek inside just to see what was there. And it just so happened that his eyes fell on this sacrificial maiden. He was immediately struck by how beautiful she was, how fair her skin, how shapely her face, how long and dark her hair. It seemed to him like she was lovelier than any noblewoman of the capital. And as he gazed at her lying there on the floor with her hair in a tangled mass sprawled out lovely against the floor, and these delicate tears streaming down her eyes because she was very concerned about the fate that awaited her and was just miserable because of it, this man began rueing the fate that awaited her and thought it was a huge shame that such a beauty should be offered up as a sacrifice to some monkey god. But after the preparations were complete, this man was brought before this girl's daughter, and they began discussing whatever it was they were initially intending to discuss. And over the course of their conversation, the father began explaining his plight. He began explaining his situation. and he told this man, "My one and only daughter was selected as the sacrifice to a local god here in this province, and as such her mother and I have spent many days in endless grief, which is made only worse as the terrible day draws close. Can you believe that such a province like this exists? What sort of terrible sins did we commit in the past that caused us to be born into such a horrible place? Why must we be cursed with this fate?" To which the man from the east replied, "For us mortals, it's impossible for us to add to the time that fate has given us. And there are no treasures more valuable to a man than his own children. For you to have to see your one and only daughter turned to mincemeat before your very eyes must be absolutely awful. Honestly, you might as well just consider her dead already. You know, even the gods and the Buddhas fear for their lives, and also love their children. But again, your daughter is practically a dead woman already. With that being said, however, I have a proposal for you, sir. Give me your daughter's hand in marriage, and I will go and die in her stead. I realize I'm not the foremost choice of sons-in-law, but given the circumstances, you really don't have much to lose." And after hearing this, and after a bit of deep thought, this girl's father replied, "You say you will die in her stead. What is it exactly you plan on doing?" And the Eastern man simply cracked a smile and told this man, "I have an idea. First though, don't tell anybody that I'm here, and shut your gates to any and all. Claim that you are doing so for purification purposes." And now the father was initially skeptical about this proposal, like, what are you plotting? Because the man didn't actually answer his question. But deciding that things really couldn't get any worse, he simply nodded and said, "I find this a little strange, but as I am willing to die for my daughter, I will do what you ask." Thus saying, the father then commanded his people to shut the gates and to claim that it was for purification purposes, and he then very discreetly led this Eastern man to where his daughter was, and there they became man and wife. Now at the time, they didn't actually have any fancy ceremonies for marriage. Essentially, marriages happened when a man visited a wife multiple times, and they consummated their love, let's go with that. And if he did so with the knowledge and the approval of the woman's family, and after he did this multiple times, he would eventually be considered her husband, and thus a marriage was complete. So we can assume that the man spent at least a few nights with this woman, enough at least for them to be considered to be married. But he had also spent enough time with her that he became even more in love with her. He fell for her even more and found her absolutely delightful in every way, and found the prospect of her being offered up to some grotesque, horrid monkey god absolutely appalling. It also just so happened that this man had brought with him two of his very best dogs, whom he had trained very intensely, and from time to time he would sneak off with these two dogs to a place where there were no people, and after capturing some monkeys from the nearby wilds, he began training these dogs to hunt and kill monkeys in particular, which, according to the text and both in Chinese and Japanese mythology and folklore, wasn't very hard because dogs and monkeys have been enemies of each other since time immemorial. And as further preparation, this man also took a great big sword, and he made sure to sharpen it and hone it to as fine of an edge as possible. And then, the day of the festival, having all the other preparations complete, this man came to his wife, and he told her, "Today, I will go and I will die in your stead. And although death is guaranteed for all of us, I still can't help but grieve that we will soon be parted." Now, his young bride wasn't entirely sure what he meant by this, nor did she have any idea exactly what he was doing, but she was still so touched that this man would go to such lengths to save her, that he would offer himself up in her stead in order to save her. And because of this, she loved him deeply. This wasn't a one-sided love. This wasn't an unfortunate marriage on her part. She began to genuinely care for this man who was sacrificing himself on behalf of her. And so, the time of the festival soon arrived, and a huge procession of people, led by a group of Shinto priests, eventually arrived at the house. And they had brought with them a large, newly made coffin-like chest. And the priests, instructing the father of the house to put his daughter into this chest, handed it off to him. And the father, then bringing this chest into the main part of the house, pulled some strings to make it seem like it was in fact his daughter that he was putting in this chest, when instead what happened was his son-in-law, this hunter, this man of the East, wearing some very plain clothing and carrying the sword that he had just sharpened to a very fine edge, got into this chest. And he made sure that both of his dogs came in with him and flanked him on either side. And then, with the hunter being put into the chest and his dogs, the father then put the lid on top of this chest, and then he tied it up with a special rope. And then he had his people pick this chest up and take it back out to the procession, and the procession began making their way toward the shrine. And as they went, the people carried staves, branches of the sakaki tree, bells, mirrors, and all other things that are considered sacred to the Shinto tradition. And they made a huge celebratory din as they went. And the young girl, however, from the safety of her house, simply watched this procession moved on slowly and steadily, like the drifting of the clouds. And she was terrified as to what was going to happen to her new husband. Her parents, on the other hand, didn't particularly care what happened to this man. They just wanted to make sure that their daughter was spared and safe. Now, it didn't take long for the procession to arrive at the shrine, which was bordered by a fence, and the procession coming up to the gate in this fence, the priests at the head of this procession then offered up some words of worship. They opened it, and then they brought the chest inside into the borders of the shrine. They took it inside a ways, they placed it on the ground, and then everybody except for the priests exited the shrine grounds. The priests, however, cut the rope that tied the chest down, and then moved off a ways and sat down in a line, waiting patiently for the sacrifice to begin. Now at this point, the man inside the chest realized that they had stopped moving and had been set down, and he decided to very slightly crack open the lid and have a look around. And the first thing that met his eyes was the sight of a giant, ferocious-looking monkey, roughly between 7 and 8 feet tall, with gleaming white fangs and a deep red face and buttocks, because monkeys have red buttocks in Japanese tradition and mythology. And this monkey was just kind of sitting off to the side, big chillin', I guess you could say. But he also noticed that surrounding this one giant monkey, there was about 100 or so regular monkeys, all with beet red faces and making a huge ruckus as monkeys do. He then also noticed that not far from where he was, there was an altar of sorts. There was like a big table. And next to this table was a gigantic, gleaming sword. And around this sword was also some salts and some spices and some other things meant to flavor meat. And the hunter determined that this is where this monkey god prepared his offerings for consumption. Now, after kind of just chilling for a bit, this great monkey finally decided to get up and make his way over to this chest. And when he did so, all of the other monkeys also moved in a bit closer to get a look at what the people had brought them this year. But as soon as this great monkey opened the lid to this chest, this Easter man sprang up and gave the command to his dogs, "Sick 'em." At which the dogs leapt from the chest and each grabbed the giant monkey and slammed it down to the floor. Then, just as quickly, this man jumped out of the chest, drew his sharpened sword that gleamed like ice, and dragging this monkey god to the altar, he pressed the blade against the monkey's neck and said with fury, "When you cut people up and turn them into mincemeat, is this how you do it? Why don't I do the same to you, cut off your head and feed your corpse to my dogs?" Now this monkey was a god, and he understood speech, and he realized the situation that he was in, but the shock of everything, the speed with which it had happened, caused him to simply gnash his teeth and blink back the tears that were starting to stream down his face, the tears of frustration and fear that were spilling from his eyes. But he made no reply. And the Eastern man, not accepting this, continued, "In exchange for the countless years you've spent murdering as many human lives, I am going to slay you, here and now. If you truly are a god, go ahead, strike me dead." And then pressing the sword harder against the monkey's neck, his 2 dogs then let go and sprinted off into the surrounding parts of the shrine. And they began tearing as many monkeys to pieces as they could get their jaws around. Now the monkeys that did manage to survive did so by climbing the various trees nearby, and they began calling out into the mountains, trying to summon any other monkeys, any of their other allies that were still out in the mountains. However, it was all for naught, because all of the monkeys in the area were already in this festival. They were at this shrine. And now at this point, one of the Shinto priests stepped forward, and very clearly being possessed by the spirit of this monkey god, declared to the Eastern man, "I swear from this time forward to never accept a sacrifice again, nor will I take the life of any human. I will not hold this man guilty of wrongdoing against me, nor will I seek vengeance upon him, the girl, or any other relatives or friends. Just please, spare me." Now when this was said, all of the other Shinto priests began following up. "Thus the god has spoken. Let him go. Please have mercy." But this man from the east would have none of it, and he continued his threats. "I don't care if I live or die. I'm going to slay you here and now for all the people you've killed, and if I die from some divine curse because of it, so be it." Now seeing this man's conviction, the monkey god doubled his pleas and swore even more oaths, and eventually his groveling did win out. "Fine," said the Eastern man. "I'll let you go, but remember this, never ever do this kind of thing again." And so saying, he pulled his sword away from this giant monkey, took a few steps back, and watched as this self-proclaimed god ran off into the mountains. And so, this man from the east returned to his bride's home and to the gratitude and joy of his new in-laws. And the man lived happily with his new wife and the girl's parents, and they feared nothing from that day on. And of course, the text then has to claim that this was certainly the result because of some kind of good karma from past lives. And thus it is said that the people forever gave up the practice of human sacrifice, and peace spread throughout the province. And that is it. That's the story. I hope you found it entertaining. Again, please tell me in the comments how much of it you could guess as it went along. Please don't forget to like the video if you did enjoy this story. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And also, I just will say that I did something a little different this time, where normally I don't actually write out a script in English, but I did this time because I was wondering that maybe it would help me be a little more accurate, it would cut down on some editing time, and also it would allow me to be a little more flamboyant in my speech. So if it was good, please don't forget to tell me. If it wasn't good, don't forget to tell me that too. This is all a work in progress. But I have nothing further to add, so if you've been watching all the way up to the end here, I thank you sincerely. Ito katajike no koso haberi kere. And hopefully we will see you here next time for another story in a similar manner that involves a great monkey god, sacrifices to him, but also is a little bit longer and a little bit more in depth and involves some extra things like a secret hidden village off in the distance that nobody else knows about, a wandering priest who comes across this village, and all of the weird goings on that happen there. So look forward to that. And with that being said, I will thank you one final time. Thank you sincerely. Have a good one, guys. We'll see you later. Goodbye.